Welcome to the College of Creation. My name is Dan.
And my name is Michael.
And we are Dungeons & Dragons DMs who love to homebrew spells, items, creatures, and features for D&D. How are you today, Michael?
I'm doing very well. I am on the mend. How are you?
Good. I am doing quite well as well. Yeah, I was sorry to hear about your little bout of COVID, which is still going around there, folks. It is still a thing, so keep yourselves safe.
It's everywhere. Yeah, we took a week off of recording to allow some recovery time for me. I am happy to report I'm in good working order now. Everything feels much, much better. I am sad to say, however, while Dan and I were talking about our creations before recording today, I did realize that I've made a grave error, and I did not follow. I did not follow the prompt whatsoever. Dan, would you like to remind our listeners what the prompt was this week?
Yes, I would. So, for those of you who haven't joined us before, what we do here on the College of Creation is Michael and I, create new things each week based on prompts that we get from our community. These prompts can ask us to build monsters, to build subclasses, to build items, feats. We've made all kinds of things already. This week we rolled on our big random table of homebrew prompts and landed on a feat that allows you to take some sort of action that will draw enemy fire to you. It's a pretty simple prompt, and also a prompt that a lot of things already kind of fit the bill on. You think about like the goading attack feature of the Battlemaster Fighter. But Michael, do you want to tell the gang here what you actually made?
I certainly did not make a feat, that's for sure. In my brain fog, in my submission to COVID-19, not that I'm making excuses for myself, I created a list of items, none of which are feats, but all of which is sort of goad opponents and pull them within melee range. So I did meet about 40% of the prompt.
Hey, you know,
it's partially there.
What is this experiment of ours, if not just, a way to trigger and stir up creativity in us in new ways? And it's happened before. I'm sure it'll happen again. If that creativity comes out in a different form than the thing that was prompted, well, y'all just get a bonus this week.
Certainly, and that is an incredibly generous way of you to put that. Thank you.
Yeah, gang, you're going to get 2 feats from me today, but it sounds like you're going to get 4 items from you,
4
Michael?
items, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, that's okay. That's okay. I'm still very excited to see whatever your items are. I made 2 feats that I feel kind of okay about. They're very simple is the thing, and I think I had the urge to overcomplicate this week, and I resisted it, and I pulled back, and I decided to just go simple. That's the kind of the interesting thing about feats, and maybe something worth talking about is about creating some of these things takes a lot less energy for me than others, because they serve a less important function in the game at large, right? Feats are cool additional ways to add like unique aspects to your character, but they're not your like core identity traits really most of the time.
Right.
Same with items, those should add on to what your character already does or fill a gap that your character is missing. But it's not going to require the same brain power to think of like, does this have a core identity that I have to think about when it comes to a subclass?
I think feats also are interesting because they really have, they should fill the same power level, right? Every feat should be equitable to 2 ability score increases, because that's the thing that you're giving up in lieu of a feat, right? Yeah. With magic items or monsters or whatever else you make, there's a huge variation in power level, in functionality, in what they bring to the game. And feats are the one thing that kind of all have to to be the same. As far as, power creep goes, you really can't overcharge a feat or it's not viable, right? It just doesn't make sense to put into the game.
Feats that are super overtuned are just like obviously going to be picked up because you kind of are like, well, any other option would be foolish. But I do like that feats, really run the gamut from heavily utility-based, heavily exploration-based, or role-play-based to super combat-focused. I have a player who, regardless of the game that he plays in with me, I think is always going to try to take one of the, like, skill expert or prodigy or observant sort of feats, the one that are more based on, like, exploration, like getting your skills to a point where you're really specialized in like one area of kind of like the exploration part of the game, less than the combat side of the game, which I think is really, really cool and interesting that you can have that wide variety. So obviously this one that I approached today is heavily combat focused, but I did try to balance it so that it was on the same level as some of those other less combat focused ones, roleplay focused ones, whatever they are. Yeah. Feats are tricky in that way for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe they don't take as much energy, but they sure take a lot of focus, so you don't go past the threshold to make them
and I think
unusable.
That's what it is, But I think that brings up kind of an interesting concept that we haven't really touched on. We've talked about a little bit what are the pitfalls that new homebrewers go through that we went through when we were starting out, those mistakes that we sort of unlearned over the course of our time doing this. But we haven't really created any sort of like cohesive, approachable rubric for like what is good homebrew though. What is a good homebrew that doesn't fall into any of those traps?
The loaded question of D&D.
Yeah, I think it's
what is a good thing?
Yeah. Well, and I think you're hitting on something right there, which is I think that initial urge to just measure it by functional numerical output, right? That's how we count best a lot of the time. But I do think when it comes to homebrewing, especially when you're homebrewing something like we do so often that's customized for your table for a player that only exists really in your game that you play with your friends, and not necessarily making it to put out as a product elsewhere.
Right.
There are other metrics that you're looking at other than just those numbers.
Yeah, there is an uneasy sanitation that you have to put a homebrew project through to make it marketable to a lot of people. If you're putting it out publicly on Reddit or Instagram or TikTok or wherever you publish your homebrew, DM's Guild, whatever, there is a certain level of coldness. It's a very strange, impersonal approach to homebrew. Whereas if you're making something for a specific player or for your home table or for even something like we're doing here where the prompts are very specific, but we're kind of just doing it to engage each other and participate in a D&D thought experiment, there's something so much warmer about that, right? There's a lot more heart that goes into a creation like that than something that would have mass appeal. And I think a lot of times that's what makes the social and exploration pillars of the game much less marketable, right? A lot of the numbers in D&D are combat related because once you enter combat, you're spending an hour of real time on 32 seconds in your character's time. Everything is so crunched down that you need to have 1,000 numbers. And if you're traveling across a continent, that's like, you can bundle 2 or 3 weeks in a couple of minutes, and that's so much time lost. So the numbers game with public homebrew is crazy. It is a wicked cycle that people can get caught up into very, very easily.
Yeah, and I think that's the gamey part of the game, right? That's the part with the most robust rule set is
Yep.
how does every single moment and action in combat work. Outside of combat, the rules become much more loose. They become a lot more customized to each table, each experience. Some tables love a hex crawl type exploration thing that like they get to see every moment of exploration, use those skills, whatever it is. Some tables want to just fast forward past all of that. And the rules are so sort of amorphous in that part of the game that you can do either one functionally well, whichever way you want to do it. So I think you're right that like when it comes to public homebrew, there's a big focus on balance and there is a big focus on measurable utility. And that measurable utility is something you don't necessarily have at your home games because
because it can already be whatever you want it to be.
yeah, exactly. You're making it for someone who already like you've maybe talked about it or they're going to use it in a unique way because that player, but it might not have visible utility to somebody who's a stranger who's looking at it from the outside. It's like, why would you make something like that? It's not useful to me. And it's like, well, I didn't make it for you. I made it for somebody else. I made it for a friend of mine that will understand the joke in it or whatever else it is, which is interesting to say because that's how so much of early D&D got made. There's so many inside jokes in D&D that still exist because somebody made them in the early days and it's persisted through. But in its origins, it's a joke.
Like any named spell is just like named after a real person that was making D&D at the time. And
so there's all these in jokes. There's all these like fascinating stuff when you get into the history of it. But all of that is to say, we digress a little bit. And I think that you're right. I think that there are two different metrics to be discussed here. One is sort of what is important just from homebrewing, just from a standpoint of like, how do we do this? And I think that's an entirely different set of measures than we use when talking about how do you do this to then publish it out and share it with the world.
We've talked about the ruthless nature of Reddit before too. I think there's something to be said about a very acute fear of putting out something that isn't perfectly down the center. The moment you put something out that's underpowered or too wildly creative or, God forbid, a little bit bloated, you will be cut down so fast, so quickly on Reddit that it just eliminates anything, any outlier, any fringe type of idea for homebrew. If you are not totally viable for the masses, it's like, oh, this sucks. Like this would never work in my game. Yeah, absolutely not, because it's a creative idea that I had that I liked, and I wish the world was not like that.
Yeah.
But man, I often think about how many great ideas are just not put out because of the fear of either being rejected or just not being treated well for whatever you think is something cool.
And I think, for me, when I look at homebrew in general, what I want to focus on more than ever really addressing balance or addressing various use cases of whatever thing it is, I always think about what is the core identity and concept that I want to hit here. And through these features, is it simple enough that it's approachable? And is it still clear enough that it captures that idea? If I can't capture the idea while keeping it simple, that's troublesome. And then I have to figure out how to do it in a simpler way, right? You can really want to make, a Jedi style subclass or class, but if you are filling it with too much stuff that's complicated, that isn't using existing actions and existing contests and things within the game, and you're adding too many things, it gets really hard to see it and understand what it is, even though that's maybe the clearest way you can express that identity. How can you simplify it and keep that core identity so that it plays well in the game and it does the thing you want it to do?
Yeah.
Those are my two biggest pillars when it comes to trying to homebrew anything.
Yeah, man. We've talked about it so much now, over the past 2 months, the difference between clarity of concept and clarity of mechanic. It is so often, far too often, blurred with as I think maybe 2 episodes ago, you said it so well. It happens too often where the thing that you want to happen really functions well with a mechanic that's in the game that has nothing to do with what you want. And that is, I think, maybe the most difficult thing for me, and something that I focus on a lot when I'm making something, is finding the right mechanic that exists in the game to serve the vision well. So they're both clear, right? And that, I think, to me, maybe that is the most important part, is finding the synergy between the two and making sure that the correct mechanic, and making sure that the mechanic that is easiest to use for the thing that you're trying to do is the one that's applied. It's difficult, but also fun.
Yeah,
fun to discover.
It is, and that's why we've talked about how important it is to know the game fairly well, to read the game, to familiarize yourself with those concepts of what are the base mechanics that everything kind of uses in some form or another. And I think that's true for any game. I think, obviously, we talk about D&D primarily here. That's our bag. That's our bread and butter, because that is the game that I think both of us know best.
Oh, yeah.
But I think for any game that has an open enough system, whatever it is, that lets you homebrew stuff in there, the first thing, the most important thing, is reading that game. Knowing what that game does. Knowing the core mechanics of various actions, various resolution mechanics, whatever they are in that game. If you understand those, then you can start to homebrew. But if you don't know those core mechanics, it's really hard, because then you're starting to invent new things that aren't necessarily going to mesh well with what exists already.
Maybe we're getting too close back into discussing pitfalls than what's good homebrew. But they go hand in hand, so they're...
It's tricky. And maybe on a bonus episode or something, we can actually codify a strong metric for what are the things, all the boxes you need to check when you're homebrewing a thing.
I would love to do that. I will say I think that for me personally, there are boxes that I check. It's not necessarily the same set of boxes that I would check if I were to sell homebrew. I check myself, but it's much more casual. It's much more customized to how I build, how I think, how my players think, what they enjoy. That is much, much more important for me when I'm making something personal than when I'm putting something out for a source or something.
Definitely.
Shall we get to our feats?
For now, you're right. We should get on to the actual point of today.
Get to what the people want, Dan.
Exactly. Do you want to present a bunch of stuff that nobody asked for yet before? Or
it would be my pleasure to present 4 items that not a single soul asked me to make. That would give me plenty of joy. If you would please, Dan, open your document and follow along with me. This is a structure that I fell in love with more than the items themselves. So much so, I think if we make items in the future, I might return to this structure. This is something that I am loosely calling To and From. This series is called Look at Me, which is the call to the goading features here. I said in my heading, the days of deciding whether the martial classes or the casting classes are better are over. It's time for them all to break bread and give each other and themselves a few well-intentioned gifts. It's important to know what you like, but it's also important to know what your friends like. As a little something special, here's a handful of items for taunting, moving, confusing, and redirecting your enemies. So the idea here is we have two sets or two groups. We have casters and we have marshals. And the 4 items here today will be 1 item from casters to casters, 1 from marshals to casters, 1 from marshals to marshals, and 1 from casters to marshals.
Yeah, I'm glancing at them and I'm kind of getting a sense of what you mean here. It's like almost you're giving this little aspect of a different archetype to a separate archetype. That little bit of functionality that just gives a marshal a little bit of magic to do, or gives a caster some kind of martial prowess.
They're just sharing their world a little bit with the other side.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a fun concept, a fun structure for items to sort of find the overlap between a couple things.
And it doesn't always have to be casters versus marshals. I think in the future, if, whatever we do, it could be sorcerers versus wizards. It could be aberrations versus undead.
Just a little bit of sharing a little aspect of one thing and presenting that, adding that to a different thing. Yeah, that's interesting.
We're learning different cultures here.
That is a fun structure.
Yeah. We're going to kick it off with the Wand of Twirling. This is a gift to casters from casters. It is a rare wand that requires attunement by a spellcaster. It holds 10 charges and regains 1d8 plus 2 charges each day at dawn. While attuned to it, you gain a +1 bonus to your spell attack and damage rolls for spells that you cast through the wand. When you hit a creature with a spell attack, you can spend 1 charge as a part of the same action to immediately turn the creature so it's facing you. Alternatively, you could spend 2 charges to prompt a DC 14 Wisdom save. On a failure, the creature is turned to face you and pulled towards you up to its movement speed. Any creature that's pulled in this way must succeed on a DC 14 Wisdom save at the beginning of their next turn, or be forced to target you with their next spell or weapon attack. That attack is made at disadvantage. So, spellcasters typically not as high of an AC, not as constitution-based as some martial classes are. So I gave the disadvantage there to maybe balance that out a little bit. But really, this is made to just pull enemies that may be fleeing or moving to alert other enemies back into the heat of combat.
It is interesting bringing in the facing mechanic. Obviously, that doesn't always have a real function in 5e at least.
Right. I think it might make the functionality of this bleed outside of combat too. There's so many times in social encounters where spinning somebody around and having them not necessarily know why or who
that's
was
a really
to blame
fun
for
take
this.
On it. Actually, I would really appreciate
confounding an enemy or another NPC.
I would really appreciate a player using it in that way outside of combat in a social encounter or whatever, just to drag somebody back into a conversation that they're clearly not wanting to have, that sort of thing. Great. That's really good.
Oh, no. Get back here.
We're not done.
Come on back here, dude.
That's good.
Moving on to the next one, we have an item to casters from marshals. This one I was on the fence how I wanted to label it. I ended up going with wondrous item, but it could be equipment. I think there's a world in which this could be non-magical.
That you make equipment sometimes that feels like equipment. It feels like just better equipment. It's good.
It could be cool. Either way. I call this the pheromone patch. This is a small, square adhesive patch that can be stuck anywhere on your bare skin as an action and remain stuck there until all pheromone doses within it have been used. Upon its discovery, it contains 1d4 plus 2 doses of a fine pink powder. Its properties can reverse engineer the act of charming other creatures. As a bonus action, you can activate the pouch, increasing your armor class by 2 and expelling a cloud, 1 dose, of the sweet-smelling powder in a 15-foot dome centered on your location. Your armor class stays boosted, and the powder remains in the area of the dome for 1 minute before losing potency. Any creature who moves into the area of the effect or starts their turn there must succeed on a DC 14 Charisma save or become charmed. But unlike a typical charm effect, creatures charmed in this way can't choose to attack any creature other than you for the duration. So they are charmed into attacking you only and nobody else. This condition remains active in an affected creature for 1 minute or until they sustain damage. So really, you're just charming people and then moving away. That's how I see this. Is you're charming people and then booking it away from the weakest people in your party, so they just chase you. I think that's probably the most effective use for this because they can't be damaged.
Sounds pretty good.
Unless you just want to sit there and eat some damage, which I suppose barbarians and fighters are good at doing anyway.
This is for casters, but
oh yeah, that is true.
I suppose if you're the right kind of caster,
we'll give it to a swords bard or a blade singer.
Yeah, I think a blade singer is a decent choice for this one. You throw up that blade song and then you do this and then you just dodge a bunch of stuff. That's pretty good.
My true love, a consumable item. Number 3 of 4, we have the Fairy Fire Tincture. This is a very rare potion. 2 marshals from casters. This is made from a blend of extracts from hallucinogenic plants. This pale blue liquid can project illusions out for others to see. When you consume this potion, you become invisible and remain that way for 10 minutes or until you take an action towards another creature. While invisible, you can use a bonus action to project an illusory image, calling back to the spell Fairy Fire, which appears as an illuminated outline of your figure in a space you can see within 30 feet of you. The projection can be ended as a free action whenever you'd like. The illusion can't take any actions, but it can move up to your movement speed if you use a subsequent bonus action to do so. So it's very mislead-esque, but you get it from...
Again, consumable. I think
consumable
that's great.
Mislead.
I do think it has that little bit of magic, but functions in a way that I think would be useful for a marshal. To you're invisible, and you also have this little other guy running around, hopefully looking like somebody who has fairy fire. So very much you want to attack that.
Lastly, and I think this is my favorite of the 4. I call this the Gong Shield. This is 2 marshals from marshals. It's a rare shield that requires attunement. The shiny surface of this perfectly round shield is covered with embossed detailings to better hold vibrational energy. While attuned to it, you gain a +1 bonus to your armor class. As a bonus action, the shield can be struck by the pommel of a weapon or some other hard object, emitting a rich and rumbling sound. Centered on your location, this sound can be heard out to 15 feet, and on every subsequent turn, you can use your bonus action again to strike the shield, extending the radius by an additional 15 feet. So if you keep using your bonus actions, you just keep emitting noise further and further out from your location. Any creature of your choice who moves into the radius or starts their turn there must succeed on a DC 14 con save or be deafened until the end of their next turn. If you do not use your bonus action to strike the shield and continue emanating the sound, it dissipates completely at the end of the current round. So if you keep hitting this shield, you just keep pushing sound out further and further.
I love
forever.
this. I'm going to use this. It's very good.
I would love for you to use it.
Cool.
And
I
let me know how
especially
it goes.
love. I'm thinking about the possibility of adding a little thing to it of when something would hit you, right, but gets blocked by the shield. That could also trigger the expansion of the radius.
Yeah, as it should.
Contribute to it, like at least continuing for another round. I don't know exactly how you would work that into the wording, but I think like it would flavor wise work to be like, this is a shield. So if it blocks something, that's also causing it to reverberate, which I guess kind of has a little bit of the opposite effect that you want, which is that people would probably stop trying to hit you because they keep hitting this thing that makes a very loud sound.
Right.
But also, I suppose it could, if it gets loud enough and large enough, it could, prompt enemies to be like, we gotta take care of this. We have to get this guy down.
That was my thinking, because everything else, the other 3 are pretty clear in the goading structure of things. This one doesn't really mention it at all, but I feel like from a flavor perspective, we've all played video games where like you start attacking some enemies and one guy like runs to ignite the brazier or sound the alarm for other people to come in, and you're like, we got to get that guy before he sets off an alarm or something. This is that guy. I think if you give this to an enemy, Like if you give this to somebody, if your party is coming up on an encampment or something, and you just have one guy that's standing on the top of a tower and they're just hitting their gong shield, like they're here, like the party is here, everybody come out to the north wall or whatever. No, we all have to encroach on the gong guy and get him out of commission before he does more damage to us.
And also, like, I think especially if you add this bit of, maybe an attack that would hit you, or an attack that misses you can also extend the range. I don't know, whatever. If you do add that, I think that also prompts the enemies or whoever is fighting the person with this shield. It prompts them to maybe find a different way to stop them from doing this. So it prompts them not to like, oh, I can't attack you because you're going to block it and it's going to make more noise. So how do I do this? I have to like run up to you and try and restrain you. I have to like try and get you unconscious or, take this thing away from you. Can I do a disarming attack? Can I do a restraint? Like whatever it is, like you want to try and remove the possibility that this person can keep doing this, but that attacking isn't the thing, which is like, that just creates an interesting strategy thing that is different than what you normally would get from a goading feature. Which
you have to be a little bit more creative.
Right. Normally the goading feature is just like, okay, they have disadvantage on attacks against anything other than you. Well, that's fine. That just means they're going to attack you normally, which is what they would maybe have already done. But this has this added aspect of they can't just attack you. They need to do something else. They need to do something unique and creative. And I like that. I like that as a concept.
Thank you.
As just a way to, through mechanics... Like, I could talk about this kind of thing all day long. Through mechanics, encourage a unique style of play, right? This is what mechanics are there for, to encourage different styles of play. And I think that this item in particular encourages a really interesting way of playing the game that is different than what normally people do. I think it's great.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I had a lot of fun writing these up. So sorry to everybody who expected me to do something completely different.
It was worth it.
Hopefully next week I will follow the prompt. I promise I will try my best.
I'm really pleased with all these. I think they're great. I agree with you. I think the Gong Shield is easily my favorite of the group, but I do think they're all good.
Thank you. Let's see what you wrote.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I've got some feats here, 2 feats that took me a little while. I went back and forth on a couple of different ideas. My first thought was this idea of champion boons had strong main character energy. It was kind of the idea of like, okay, if you've got somebody in your party who like kind of is the champion, is the first one to jump into battle, is the first one to challenge the villain to single combat or whatever it is, right? Like, why not reward that particular character with something unique that actually draws fire to them and gives them a little bit of a bonus for being that, frontliner. But it was a little bit hard for me to figure out exactly what all those looked like. I did have a couple that I liked. My favorite thing that I actually made, which I probably would use again and I think has a unique aspect to it, is... one of the boons was the boon of the beacon or something like that, or blessing of the beacon. I forget what I called it, but basically it allows you to emit like 30 feet of bright light. And all of your allies within that area of bright light become invisible. That's it. That's the whole thing. They just can't see your friends, but they can see you really well. Which, kind of like a couple of yours is like, well, that's not functionally causing anyone to attack you, but it does make it a lot harder to attack your friends, and you're just a very attractive target at that point because you're emitting a bunch of light.
Right.
It's
simple. If your DM is using correct enemy tactics, why would they search for your friends and not attack you?
Or use an AoE
if you have enemies that are
spell.
going for the easiest target, they're going to see you and just attack you.
I liked that a lot. I like it better as an item, especially a consumable item. I think that's a lot better.
Should have made some items.
I should have made some items. No, but I ended up going with 2 feats. So you can go ahead and open up your file here. And see,
Perfect.
I've got 2 feats here. One is called Provocateur, and one is called Hostility. The second one has slightly more complex mechanics, but I think they're still approachable enough. So we'll start with the Provocateur, which is a feat for barbarians, fighters, monks, and rogues. So it's all exclusive to the martial classes. You have mastered the art of provoking your opponent into mistakes. You gain the following benefits. Increase your charisma score by 1 to a maximum of 20. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can forego one of your attacks to attempt to bait a creature into attacking you. Choose a creature that can see or hear you within 15 feet of you and make a charisma intimidation check contested by the target's wisdom insight. If you succeed, the creature must use its next turn to take the attack action against you if possible. If the creature misses you with this attack, you can then use your reaction to make a single weapon attack against that creature.
I like this for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I really enjoy the contest between intimidation and insight. You don't see that nearly enough, that pairing together.
Yeah.
I especially love it because charisma, so often, you equate that to warlocks, bards, sorcerers, heavy casters, and intimidation is always the odd child out in that batch of skills because that's the one that like barbarians, fighters, rogues have as an option when you select that class, right? You have the option to take intimidation and you almost never get to use it well because what is a better dump stat than charisma for those types of fighters?
You're usually dropping charisma if you're a fighter or barbarian especially. Yeah. I do have like a heavy charisma-based rogue in a game right now, and it's incredible.
Oh, that's so good. It's so good. I love that this fits into so many distinct subclasses. This would be fantastic on a mastermind rogue, fantastic on a swashbuckling rogue, really cool on a lot of different monk subclasses. Even fighter, if you had this on like an Echo Knight or a Rune Knight that had some additional external properties, this would be really sick.
It's got a samurai quality to it. There's a little
samurai
bit of like,
as well.
Something that you could mess with a samurai on this too.
I love the samurai.
I considered actually changing it from intimidation to performance, but I do think that you hit on the right thing, which is that intimidation is something that these classes can choose.
Yeah.
Or at least 3 out of the 4 of them can choose as a proficiency.
It feels like the right choice.
Performance is a little more... It almost feels like a little bit more of a bluff, and I wanted this to be not you bluffing, not you like trying to fake your way into being attacked, but truly to like be the biggest threat.
Like, get over here. Yeah. I'm the one you need to take out first.
Yeah.
Go through me before you get to them.
Exactly. So yeah, that is the Provocateur feat.
I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
My second one here is Hostility. This is again for barbarians, fighters, monks, and rogues. You are adept at goading and frustrating your enemies. You gain the following benefits. You increase your base armor class by 1. And when a creature misses you with a weapon or spell attack, you can use your reaction to give that creature 1 point of hostility. For each point of hostility a creature has, it gains a -1 penalty to attack rolls against creatures other than you. A creature with 5 points of hostility must use its action to attack you. When a creature with any points of hostility hits you with a weapon or spell attack, it deals additional force damage equal to its current hostility point total, and all points of hostility are removed. So this has like a little bit of a risk-reward situation, right? You're using your reaction to basically, and you can do this to multiple creatures at the same time, right? If they miss you with a weapon or a spell attack, you kind of like, maybe you taunt them in that moment. Maybe you kind of like give them a little bit of a little bit of a sneer that makes them think, "Ooh,
keep on coming, man.
This one," and they just keep building that hostility until ultimately they do hit you harder than they would. It's not a ton, but it is there.
I have
worth noting.
To preface my question, I love this. At this point, well enough about me that I love risk reward. I love that type of balance in a game.
Same.
This is such a great and cool way to do that. I have a question because it's not stated in here. I don't think it says a creature with 5 points of hostility must use its attack, or must use its action to attack you. But is there a cap to hostility points?
I didn't have a cap in mind.
So this is interesting because with the penalty to attack rolls, you could just render another creature unusable
to anybody except you, right? Right. That's the thing, is that it is then incentivized to attack you.
At 5 points, they have to attack you, but if your armor class is high enough, which you get an increase here, they're already at a -5 penalty to hit. And if they keep missing you, then they keep going down.
They're not at a -5 penalty to hit you, though. It's creatures other than you.
Other than you.
So their regular attack bonus and everything is considered when it comes to you.
I
but
thought
yeah,
that is
a good note.
Sentinel polearm mastered your feet.
No, that would be way too much. I think that would be crazy, because then you'd have this like diminishing returns thing where it's like at a certain point they just can't hit you, and you just keep adding a negative to their thing. So it does it has that same vibe of the goading attack where it's like, okay, you don't have disadvantage to hit anyone else, but I'm continually building more of an incentive for you to attack me over anybody else, right?
I just want I want this to be applied to the one barbarian that is functioning within a party of divination wizards, and the wizards just keep using their portent to cause this guy to keep missing over and over and over again. So they're just like racking up 10, 15 points of hostility.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is like you do have to use a reaction, right? And if we think about it in terms of like most combats in D&D, unless it's a really big wild combat, going to take maybe 4 rounds at most. Yeah. Right. So you're not talking about too terrible much in terms of a penalty or a bonus. And if you do want to like focus on a single creature, right, you're maybe going to take an extra between 2 and 5 points of extra damage.
Yeah, not terrible.
You know, it's not a crazy amount, and also you're not completely cutting off other enemies at the knees, but it is this little incentive to attack you more than anybody else, and gives you that little bonus to AC just to make you a little hardier when it comes to taking those extra attacks that are going to be directed at you.
This is great.
Thanks.
I like this a lot.
I think I might need to fine tune it a little bit. Maybe that reaction is too much. Maybe I should throw a cap somewhere, but I don't know. I think for what it is, it's a feat. It's supposed to be kind of simple, easy to grasp, easy to manage, not overwhelming in terms of all of the other features you have.
I just recently made a TikTok about feats, listing my top 10 favorite ones, and probably 3 or 4 of them. The reason they made it onto the top 10 was because of an additional use of a reaction. It is the piece of action economy that gets the least amount of attention, just because it always, it doesn't occur on your turn. So sometimes people miss the reactions altogether, even when they can take one. So anytime I see a feature that can give additional some additional bonus to a reaction, I really like that a lot.
Cool. I mean, I also think that the other thing is that it does have this thing you need to track, right? This little fiddly bit of like where's the hostility going and all that. But I feel like if you apply that to, obviously, if it's casters, you've already got so much stuff on your sheet that you need to be paying attention to. You've got spells that you could use, reactions, whatever else. But like Barbarian, Fighter, Monk, Rogue, barring a handful of subclasses from each of those, you probably don't have all that much that's like fiddly and trackable on your character sheet. So adding, for those martial classes, adding this little thing that's like, you got to keep track of this is really not overwhelming, I don't think, to these character classes. So I felt like, having a little metric, having a little pool of things is interesting. For those classes, to just have something else to do, to focus on in combat. It's always good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. This is
I'm
great.
glad you like them. I'm glad you like them. I went hemmed and hawed a bit on this one, I will say, but I'm pleased with what I came up with. And like I said, I think at the end of the day, I realized that like they're feats, and I shouldn't be stuffing them full of every idea I have, because that's not what feats are for.
Yeah.
Feats hold a different function in the game, and I need to focus on those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, these are beautiful in their simplicity.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
If you all listening at home or in your car or wherever the heck you are have other ideas for a feat that can goad and draw enemy fire to you, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com. You can also head over to our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/collegeofcreationpod, and shoot us a message there. You can see these creations and all of our other creations that we've made for free. You can just go and look at them, download them, use them in your game.
Or you could always follow us on TikTok. I am there at Michael_Barlos. Dan is there at Sir Dr. K, for as long as that ship stays afloat.
Yep. Hey,
Hey, yeah, it is what it is. We're the orchestra playing as the Titanic goes down. So please come look at our content as we view the twilight hours.
TikTok goes away. I guess you can find the College of Creation podcast on, what do we say, Tumblr?
Yeah, maybe. Tumblr. Maybe we'll reinvigorate MySpace.
Anyway, good creations today, Michael. I know you didn't make what was asked of you, but I do think you made some pretty good stuff regardless.
Thank you.
So...
Likewise, I think that both of your feats are really great and highly applicable for many martial classes. I think they'd be very useful.
Yeah. Thank you, friend. Thank you indeed.
Yeah.
I think it's your turn now for us to roll
Certainly.
for whatever's going to happen next. What's next week looking like for us? We have our big list of homebrew prompts from folks like you.
Certainly.
If you've got a prompt, send it to us. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to add it to our big list.
We are going to roll
which
here.
keeps growing, and we keep adding things. Send it on over to us at collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com.
Today we're looking at a 7, Dan.
We have a 7. 7, okay. This is from Solid Snarf on the Discord. Thank you very much, my friend. We have a homebrew monster, finally. We haven't made a monster yet.
For the first time.
I mean, you made a monster stat block for a different thing, but you weren't asked to. This is the first time that we've been asked to make a monster.
That is true.
This is a homebrew monster inspired by the Rancor from Star Wars, specifically that carries around a metal door.
Interesting.
A Rancor-inspired homebrew monster carrying around a metal door. What is this metal door? Is it portcullis? Is it used as a shield, as a weapon, as something entirely different, as a surfboard?
So it has been quite a while since I've watched a Star Wars movie in general. Is that included? If you're listening, please let us know, or let me know specifically why the door is included here. Is it because the Rancor escaped by knocking down a door?
I believe the Rancor does not escape. Notably, I might have to watch this scene again.
It just busts down a door somewhere.
Luke gets sent into the pit, and then there's the Rancor, right?
Yeah.
And it's in Jabba's palace. I believe
I have to go watch this
Luke
movie
defeats the Rancor. I believe a door closes on the Rancor's head.
Oh. Okay.
I don't remember all of the details of this fight, so I'm going to have to rewatch it to get some inspiration, I think.
If the door closes on the Rancor's head, this is an insanely cool prompt. What a fantastic thing. I like that a lot.
I am going to have to watch it again. I'm going to... It's up in the air whether or not I'm going to watch the whole movie or if I'm going to watch just the scene.
Just find the scene. Yeah.
Honestly, if I'm going to watch Return of the Jedi, though, I might as well just watch the whole original trilogy.
At that point, I'm
I might as
committing
well.
a whole 7.5 hours of my life to this D&D prompt right now.
Hey, there are worse things to do with 7.5 hours of your life.
Certainly. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Solid Snarf, for that prompt. I have no idea where I'm going to go with this, but I am going to have a good time nonetheless.
I agree. This is a strange one. One, because it's the first monster stat that we have been asked to do, but also what a very specific ask. I like that.
It is.
I like really specific things because it forces us to think a little bit more creatively if we want to land outside of the box. In any case, this has been a fantastic episode. I loved seeing your creations. I was very happy to share my incorrect creations. I'm going to flip the script today. Dan, do you have anything that you'd like to say to our listeners before we go?
Michael, I was not expecting this. But, nevertheless, I do have something to say to the people before we go.
Love.
Folks, if you've got something going on at your TTRPG table, if you're feeling really any kind of way about the game you're playing, good, bad, uncertain, the best thing you can do is talk about it. Bring it to your GM. Bring it to the other players. Have a conversation above the table, out of the game, without the pressure and stress of trying to get everything right all the time or do it like the shows that you've seen. If you have a conversation, everything's going to come out better than if you keep that in and don't mention it, don't bring it up, don't address it. If it's just something you want to see in the game that you play, tell your GM. Tell your friends. Communication is key, folks.
I 100% agree. That's fantastic advice.
Well, thanks for flipping that around on me today, Michael.
Yes.
I don't know how to end the podcast now.
Well, hey, thank you, Dan. Thank you for everybody who is listening, wherever you are listening at. We appreciate you to no end. Until next week, this has been the College of Creation. Goodbye.
Farewell. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey folks, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the College of Creation. If you want to see our creations from this episode and all of our past episode creations, you can find those for free on our Patreon page at patreon.com/collegeofcreationpod. And if you decide to become a patron, you will also automatically get access to any revised versions, plus our patron Discord and bonus episodes where Michael and me just talk about all kinds of things. You can send your homebrew prompts and questions to collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com. Our music is by Fuserwolf. You can check out his tunes on Bandcamp and Spotify. Thank you so much again for listening, and we will see you right here again next week.